It was Thanksgiving of 1998 when Norma Patton said goodbye to her daughter Melissa on the phone and told her that she loved her. That would be the last conversation they would ever have. Melissa went missing, and for years it remained a mystery. But in reality, part of the mystery was solved very quickly when some of her remains were recovered chopped up in black trash bags in Atlanta, Georgia, not far from where she lived. But the problem was, for several years, the remains remained unidentified until 2003. That's when the Flint River killer was arrested, a man who admitted to being a serial killer. That man is also Melissa's father. Well, the mystery continued, and it would take years, decades, for someone to actually be charged with Melissa's murder. And it wasn't her serial killer father. Instead, it was her husband, Christopher Wolfenbarger. Christopher is now on trial, and tonight we take you back to the scene of where Melissa's remains were found and to the river where her serial killer father disposed of his victims. But first, in the quiet town of Carrollton, Georgia, a place where steeples rise above oak-lined streets and Sundays are reserved for church and sweet tea, the community was shattered by a nightmare they never saw coming. On the morning of February 20th, 2025, Kristen and James Brock were found shot to death in their bed, their 6-year-old daughter trembling as she discovered the gruesome scene. Their 17-year-old daughter, Sarah Patrick, called 911 in what seemed like a panic. Days later, she stood in front of their congregation, delivering a tearful eulogy that ended with a cryptic phrase, "I'm sorry." The town wrapped her in prayers, convinced she was another victim of tragedy, until the unthinkable happened. Sarah was arrested, charged as an adult with the cold-blooded murder of her mother and stepfather. Who is Sarah Patrick? Tonight, we answer that question as family members pour into court talking about both sides of this alleged teenaged killer. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Great to have you with us. And we're talking about an accused killer here, an accused killer who doesn't really look like a killer. If you look at that face, right? Looks like a freckle-faced teenager. That's what I see when I look at that picture. But that's a mugshot. She's accused of this horrific crime. Shooting and killing her mother and stepfather while they slept inside their home, and then allowing the carnage to be discovered by her little sister. It's cold. It is cold. So that's one image of Sarah Patrick. I want you to take a look at another one on social media where she seems to have a different persona, right? Before this disaster, before this tragedy, before this double murder, you know, she would glam it up a little bit. Then when the murder happened, she was going on social media and talking about it. And then in a strange fact associated with all of this, she was contacting true crime podcasters and pitching the story of the murder of her mother and stepfather. Now, at that point, no one had been arrested because it took months for this arrest. And everyone looked at it as kind of strange, right? It's kind of strange. And you could look at it being not strange that, you know, my parents are murdered and no one's been arrested. I got to do something about it. And, you know, I'll contact, because I've seen all these podcasts, they start talking about it, and all of a sudden someone gets arrested. Well, the one who got arrested was her. So today, for the first time, I think we really got a snapshot into her life and her family, and it was an emotional day inside of the courtroom. Extremely emotional. This was a bond hearing. Her and her attorneys trying to get her released before the trial, trying to get her out of jail. And it was really broken down into two opposing factions. It's one family, but there's part of the family that's more aligned with her stepfather, and then there's a part of the family that's more aligned with her So I want to begin by taking a listen first to the stepfather's sister who spoke today and spoke about Sarah Patrick and spoke about what happened to this family and spoke about the danger that she believes would exist if this teenaged accused killer would get out on bond. Take a listen.
I not only lost my brother, but also my sister-in-law in the most horrific way imaginable. Every night I lay awake, unable to sleep, haunted by the thought of what my brother Jamie and Kristen might have experienced in those final moments. With the possibility that they were awake when the defendant entered their room with a gun, and I imagine their terror in their final breath. The defendant is charged with the brutal murders of my brother, Jamie, and my sister-in-law while they were lying in their bed. Shot multiple times, including both shot in the head. My 5-year-old niece was then woke up to find their parents lifeless. The trauma this innocent child will carry for the rest of her life is unfathomable. And what makes this even more heartbreaking is that her sister loved the defendant. She looked up to her, and for reasons I will never understand, the defendant caused such imaginable pain. And I'm so thankful that his life was spared. With all of this in mind, I am deeply concerned about safety should the defendant be released on bond. I ask you, please consider the following factors when deciding whether to grant a bond. My first concern is flight risk. The defendant has financial resources provided by the immediate family, which would enable her to flee. Her family maintains that she is innocent, and given her manipulative behavior, I believe she may attempt to flee. Second concern is witness intimidation. The defendant has shown a pattern of intimidation towards family members and others with knowledge of the crime. I fear that if she's released, she will continue this behavior to silence anyone who could testify against her. My third concern is evidence. The brutality of these murders is not in dispute. My family and I have seen the death certificates, and although we are not aware of exactly how many shots were fired, we do know that there were multiple gunshots to both Jamie and Kristen. Personal safety. If the defendant can kill her own parents in such a violent manner, I fear for my own safety and the safety of my family and friends. The possibility that she could harm us is terrifying, and I urge you to consider this in your decision. My prayer is that justice will be served for Jamie and Kristen, and their bond will be denied for the defendant, as she has shown that she is capable of extreme violence and manipulation.
One of the victim's sisters, that's Kim Bowling. That emotion is real and palpable, and I think it brings home what this case is about. And that point that she made, I think, is kind of significant, right? If she could walk in and do this to her mother and stepfather, well, who else is potentially in the line of fire? Let's bring in our think tank. Joining us tonight, trial attorney, former police lieutenant Rick King. Ann Bremner, trial attorney, fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers, and criminal defense attorney, former district attorney Matthew Mangino. Great to see everyone tonight. Rick, I look at that picture. She doesn't look like a killer, but when you talk about what happened to her mother, what happened to her stepfather, do you think it's valid to make the argument that, hey, if someone could do this to her own parents, then who else is in the line of fire here? Is she a danger, a potential danger to society?
So I'm going to go back to what you said at the very beginning of the broadcast, which was you called her a freckle-faced teenager. When I see her as a 17-year-old freckle-faced teenager. And we live in a country where we decided that we're going to give people the presumption of innocence. And at the end of the day, for me, when I look at her as a 17-year-old freckle-faced teenager who is given the presumption of innocence, I say that she's a teenager with no record. And on that, I'm leaning in favor of bond, because I think that there are, and when we look at it, and what the relative spoke about was the flight risk, the intimidation factor to her sister, and those issues are significant, but I think those all can be remedied with something from the government, ankle monitor, house arrest, things like that we can guarantee where she's supposed to be. And so for me, I would err on the side of her constitutional right to have the ability to make a bond.
And Bremner, how dangerous do you think this teenager is potentially at this point? And Rick's right, presumed innocent, but locked up.
Yeah, I think, and I disagree with my good friend Rick King. It's great to see you, Rick, again. I think, I look at her like a cold-blooded killer. They say they have a mountain of forensic and also, I think, digital evidence against her, a mountain. We heard that in O.J. Simpson, but of course, when you have digital and other forensic evidence, it's a little bit different in this day and age. Yeah, she's a cold-blooded killer. She's somebody who could kill a witness. We don't even know. We look at likelihood to flee. And how dangerous is she to the community? That's all we look at right now. And there's probable cause to believe she committed the crime. So I would err on the other side, which would be public safety, and keep her in.
Now, what I want to play for you, Matthew, this is Kelly Brown will be reading a letter from the stepfather's 12-year-old son from a prior relationship, right? So half brother of the defendant in this case, 12 years old. She's going to read the letter that he wrote. Let's take a listen.
I wanted to talk today because my dad and stepmom was shot and killed. I miss him every day. My dad was my hero and the person I looked up to the most. We did everything together. He helped me with school, and he always made me laugh, and we joked around a lot. Since he died, everything has changed. I feel sad and confused. It's hard to sleep, it's hard to focus, and it's even hard to smile sometimes. I still wait to hear his voice or see him walk through the door, but I know that will never happen again. What makes me more sad is I trusted Sarah and I loved her like a sister. Why would she do this to me? And why would she hurt everyone like this? I don't understand why someone would do this, but I know it is not right. My dad and Kristen didn't deserve this. No one does. And I don't think someone who could do something like this should be allowed to go free right now. I wouldn't feel safe, and I would be so scared. Please think about what my family is going through. I hope you make a decision that protects us and remembers who my dad was. A good man, a loving dad who didn't deserve to die. Thank you for listening to me.
You know, Matthew, the 12-year-old is asking the same questions everybody else is asking. Why? Why? How important is that question for this case? Not just for this bond hearing, but for this case going forward. Why this happened?
Well, that certainly is an issue that the victims' families are going to want to know. Why did something like this happen? But Vinny, this is very tragic, and my heart goes out to this 12-year-old who lost his father. But when you listen to this is more like a victim impact statement. In fact, it is a victim impact statement, but we're at a bond hearing, and nobody's been convicted of anything yet. Certainly there's probable cause for this case to move forward. A trial date has been scheduled in January, but there's still the idea that the person who's accused is presumed innocent, and she's 17 years old. And as I listened to the judge when he made his decision in this case, one of the these that he talked about was a flight risk. Is a 17-year-old without a driver's license really a flight risk? These bodies were discovered in February. She wasn't arrested until July 8th. She could have fled then. Is she a danger? Well, certainly the family is afraid of her because the crimes that she's accused of are diabolical. Shooting somebody to death, two people, your mother, your stepfather, while they're laying in bed. But again, those crimes haven't been proven beyond a reasonable doubt with regard to the accused in this case. And I think that the courts will have to take a look at this again in the future, because I'm sure this issue is going to be raised so that she can participate effectively in her defense. And that's difficult to do while you're isolated in adult prison when you're 17 years old.
Let's take a listen to Tristan Brock, who is the stepfather's son, and this was powerful as well, and addressed some of the issues that Matthew was talking about.
Your Honor, it feels like I'm living in a nightmare. I'm depressed. I struggle to sleep. I can't even walk through my own living room without seeing his urn and be reminded of everything all over again. I miss my father deeply. I wish I could see him again. I wish he could have met his grandson. And above all, I wish I could just hear his voice one more time. But instead now, what I have is an urn that represents memories we made and the countless memories that will never be. I believe the defendant poses a serious flight risk. Her family has significant financial resources and a wide support network, both of which could easily be used to help her evade law enforcement if she were released. These are not speculative concerns. They are grounded in the reality of her background and the means available to her. Additionally, based on her past behavior and what I know of her personally, I do not believe she has the integrity or accountability required to face the consequences of her actions. She has shown a willingness to avoid responsibility, and in my opinion, she would absolutely attempt to flee rather than stand trial if given the opportunity. In addition to the risk of flight, I am deeply concerned for the safety of my family. The gruesome and violent details of this case have shown me that the defendant has a disturbing lack of regard for human life. If someone is capable of what happened here, then I cannot ignore the real possibility that she could pose a threat to those of us left behind.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to hear from those in court today who were supporting Sarah Patrick, the accused double murderer. Plus, coming up next hour. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, Donna Adelson is accused of being a part of a murder-for-hire plot that ended the life of her former son-in-law, Dan Markell. Donna's daughter, Wendy Adelson, has testified for prosecutors 3 times but has not been charged. What will she say this time around? Tonight, we investigate.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
Saturday nights on ION
is our night.
Let's go! Double headers every Saturday at 7 and 10 p.m. Eastern. The new Saturday Night Out is on ION all season long.
Kristen Brock's 17-year-old daughter, Sarah Grace Patrick, has been taken into custody and charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault in connection with the deaths of her mother and her stepfather. Mountains of evidence has gotten us through here today. Lots of processing, lots of working with our law enforcement partners to get us to where we are today that honed in on her as a suspect.
Mountains of evidence, but we don't know what's in those mountains of evidence, right? And it didn't really become a part of the bond hearing either, which was a little surprising. A lot of the bond hearings we cover here on Court TV, you kind of get a preview of some of the big pieces of evidence that they have. Sometimes you get a preview of the alleged motive. We really didn't get that in this bond hearing. So there were people there to support Sarah Patrick who believe she should get out on bond, but surprisingly, none of them are family members. None of them. You've got a pastor of a church she's been a member of for a year, the woman who took her in after the murders, her friend and her friend's mom. Take a listen.
My name is Ben Bonner, and I serve as lead pastor at Catalyst Church in Carrollton, Georgia. I'm writing on behalf of Sarah Grace Patrick, a young woman who's been a part of our church family for about a year now. Sarah Grace first came to Catalyst around a year ago. From the beginning, she was eager to grow in her faith and get involved. She made a personal decision to be baptized not long after attending, and has stayed consistently connected to the church ever since. She didn't just show up on Sundays, she came during the week as well, asked questions, served, invited others, including her boyfriend at the time, and clearly found a place where she felt at home. Throughout the past year, and even through the challenges of this year, she has continued to attend services regularly. She and her family often travel over an hour just to be with us. I've spoken and prayed with Sarah Grace many times throughout this season. Her commitment to staying grounded in her faith and connected to a healthy community has remained steady. She's even called from jail multiple times so I could pray with her. Her father has also become an active part of the church. He was baptized recently, and he still comes to services faithfully. It's a privilege to walk with their family during such a difficult time, and we love and care for them deeply. If it's possible and the court sees fit to grant Sarah Grace bond, we would gladly continue to walk alongside her as a church.
I met Sarah about 3 days after all this happened with her mom and dad.
And how did you come to meet her?
I was friends with her dad. We used to play cell phone games. He told me what happened. Told me that the kids didn't have any clothes. Since the house was closed off, they didn't have anything. So I've taken in a child or two in my time. So my heart broke for it, and I was like, please let me take her shopping. So I came and picked Sarah up and took her to get clothes, underwear, deodorant, your basics. Sarah actually ended up moving in with me. It was a better situation for her. I had an extra bedroom. She came to stay with me after everything happened with her mom. She used to lay in the bed. She would cry and sob, and I'd watch her grieve.
Did you have any disciplinary problems or any type of issues with Sarah while she was at your house?
Not even one, honestly. I've had some teenagers and one that gave me a hard time, and Sarah was a pleasure. She was easy.
At the time, Donald and Kristen were in the middle of a custody battle. When I first met Sarah, she was a little shy, very sweet, kind, and humble. She was cautious around new people, but soon she warmed up to me and once told me I had a motherly presence that made her feel safe. As our relationship grew, she began to open up to me about her past and experiences with Kristen and James. One thing she said that has always stayed with me was, no matter what they've done, I will always forgive them and love them, because deep down, I know that's not who they truly are. The statement showed the depth of Sarah's heart. She truly believes in forgiveness and has always extended the same grace to others. She once told me that holding grudges isn't what God wants for us, and I've carried that wisdom with me ever since. While staying at our house, Sarah was full of life, happy, upbeat, and in many ways a typical teenager. But there were also signs of trauma she endured. She would often apologize for things she never had to. like she would asking for food, taking a shower, or using the bathroom. It was heartbreaking. Despite that, she remained incredibly kind, respectful, and especially patient with my son, who is on the autism spectrum and is the same age as Sarah. She was fiercely protective of him and everyone she cared about. I respectfully ask that you consider granting Sarah grace bond. She is not a threat to anyone. She is deeply loved and supported by my family, by me, and her own family. I truly believe she deserves a chance to be home, surrounded by those who care about her.
When you say friends, talk to me about what that looks like. Are you guys talking on the phone?
Via Snapchat sometimes. We would call, I'd check in on her. I was never allowed over at her house.
But she was allowed at your house?
Yes, ma'am, I'd go and get her.
Were you in contact with Sarah after the incident happened?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have any concerns about Sarah leaving or running or trying to get away in any way?
No.
Okay. Did she ask you to come pick her up and take her back to Alabama and hide her or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
And Bremner, no family members. I'm surprised. I mean, Cody Thomas went and spoke with her grandfather, who's the father of her mom, and he was very supportive of her, believed in her. That doesn't help you in court when your family doesn't speak up for you.
Yeah, not a one of them. I was just, thinking to myself on the likeliness of flight. You look at the severity of the crime. She's not going to stick, and her family's not in there saying we're going to do anything, take care of her, make sure she doesn't flee, etc. And finally, these hearings. I've had hearings with testimony representing victims, representing defendants. Victims have a right to be heard at this stage, and this victim family has spoken with respect to their concerns about her flight risk and how dangerous she is to them and to the community. And I haven't heard anything from anyone, like you just said, from her own family, her loved ones standing up for her today.
Yeah, Matthew Mangino, if members of her family aren't going to stand up for her in a case like this, I think it sends a bit of a signal to the judge, doesn't it, if they're not going to speak in court on her behalf?
Well, it may. And in this situation, we have to focus on what this hearing is about. And this hearing is about bond. It's about bail. And bail is one of its primary reasons is to ensure that someone shows up in the future. Okay. Are they a flight risk? And of course, are they a danger to the community? Now, we heard from 3 witnesses here, people who are not family members, which to me, in a sense, even provides a little more legitimacy. You have a family member in there.
Oh,
saying,
maybe
hey,
in most cases, Matthew, but
the
the victim is a member of the same family. That's the part, right? Like, so it would be much more powerful if perhaps if the father of the victim said, yeah, let her out. She can stay in my house. But that didn't happen. That's not part of the equation here. And I think that would have been a much more powerful proposition of some form of a bail package for the judge.
Well, it may have supported that position with some greater emphasis. But here we have disinterested witnesses. Someone who took her in. A friend's mother, a pastor from her church. These are people who do not have a direct interest in this case or with regard to her personally. They know her and they spoke about her participation in church. They spoke about her being a good person. They spoke about her not ever saying she wanted to leave or take me someplace or I have to get out of here. So sometimes disinterested witness can be more powerful than a family member who's going to come in and say, hey, this is my granddaughter or this is my niece, please let her out. I always would favor a disinterested witness.
We only have about 20 seconds left, Rick, but, there's almost like a message, an undertone that, hey, I don't want her living in my house from the family. Like she's not living with her family. No one from her family took her in. Maybe they're a little bit fearful.
And that might be so, Vinny, but here's the thing. So there's a reason why in all the other cases that you covered on Court TV, why you heard what was some of the evidence against the defendant. Because in these hearings, with these kind of charges, it is it is proof evident and presumption great. And that's why they show you the evidence, so that you can know that there's something there, but there's no there. They didn't give it to us here. And for that reason, she's 17. And there are ways with which the government can fashion a system where we know she's going to show up and we can protect everybody else.
Well,
she's not going anywhere.
She's definitely going to show up now because she's denied bond. But we've got more to get to. All right. Think Tank staying with us. When we come back, Cody Thomas returns to the scene where the daughter of the serial killer's body was found. Cody on the case. Up next.
This is a case about domestic violence. They had evidence that he had caused a black eye, that she had witnesses that observed bruises on her neck. These extremities are found, everything but the torso. So everything but the midsection of Melissa Bachman is located. almost immediately after Melissa just vanished, this defendant essentially just removes all of her stuff out of the house.
There are two ways to look at the trial that's on Court TV right now of Christopher Wolfenbarger. He's accused of the murder of his wife, Melissa. It was a cold case, took years to solve to get enough evidence to charge him. But prosecutors say this is a case of domestic violence. This is a man who abused his wife, Melissa, and then at some point abused her to the point of murdering her. But there's a twist here and a second way to look at this case, because the victim, Melissa, is the daughter of the man on the left, the Flint River killer, a serial killer. And that's her mom, who admitted, after getting immunity, admitted helping to plan some of his murders and clean them up and get the bodies into sleeping bags so they could be dumped in the river. That's the trial. Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas spent the day at the crime scenes today. So let's begin here with where Melissa's remains are discovered. What can you tell us about that area?
Well, Vinny, we saw where the remains were discovered, but you also know what's across the street from where those remains were found. That's where Christopher Wolfenbarger worked, at this place called Action Glass in the late 90s. And not only that, Vinny, we saw where the remains were, and then we wanted to see where they lived, because we knew it was in close proximity. It was just maybe a quarter mile around the street, and I wanted to do that because I wanted to see if Christopher Wolfenbarger did this, how easy would it have been for him to take these remains to somewhere that he was familiar with. Take a look. We're here now in Southwest Atlanta, and if you look over my right shoulder, you'll see this building here. Now, this used to be the Action Glass store where the defendant, Christopher Wolfenbarger, used to work. Now, why is this location important? Not only is it where he used to work, but right here across the street, maybe you see how close in proximity it is, maybe 10 to 12 steps, this is where investigators came out and later found and identified Christopher Wolfenbarger's wife, Melissa's remains. They actually found a human head in a trash bag. Now, this was the late 90s, 1999. Melissa went missing after Thanksgiving 1998, but they came out here, found those remains in trash bags. They came out a few days later after they found that human head, found the rest of the remains in more trash bags right here across from the place where this defendant, her husband, Christopher Wolfenbarger, used to work. But another question, how close did they live to his place of business? So that brings us here, right around the corner, still in Southwest Atlanta, to Brookline Street. Now, we know this is where Christopher and Melissa used to live because a neighbor testified earlier in this trial. She still lives in this community, but she said Christopher and Melissa used to live across the street from her. She said it was a tight-knit community. It wasn't, you know, as affluent as some other communities, but everyone knew each other. Everyone knew each other. She also said at times she would hear Christopher and Melissa arguing. Then she'd hear Melissa say something to the effect of, "Chris, stop doing this to me," as if Christopher was harming her, maybe something broke. And then she said sometime in 1999, Christopher told her that Melissa moved out. And we know Christopher's story is that Melissa left him to start a new life in California. Now he is on trial, charged with her murder. But again, this is where they used to live, just right around the corner, almost a quarter mile from where he worked and from where Melissa's remains were found. And Vinny, during that neighbor that I mentioned, during her testimony, she also mentioned seeing Melissa with a bruise on her face one time, but this neighbor didn't call the police. She wanted to stay out of it, but she knew both of them pretty well.
Yeah, and I can understand that.
Right.
So this is interesting because this is one part of the story, the prosecution story. It's all about proximity of the remains to the workplace and to the home, right? All in the same area. But you also went to the Flint River today, which is the other side of this, the Flint River killer, the father of the victim.
Right, Vinny, and that's arguably one of the most interesting parts of this case. We've heard a lot about him. Carl Patton killed 5 people in the late 70s, threw him in the Flint River. That's how he got donned that name. So we went down there, Woodbury, Georgia. That's where a boat ramp was, so we could really get down to see the water, really take viewers to the scene. Take a look at this. So we know the victim, Melissa's father, was Carl Patton. Who was Carl Patton? Carl Patton was donned the Flint River killer here in Georgia back in the late 70s. Why was he the Flint River killer? That's because he committed 5 murders from 1973 to 1977, and he admitted to killing all 5 of those people, and his wife, Norma Patton, got on the stand just a few days ago during this trial and also admitted to helping Carl Patton murder those people, or cover those murders up, and dump them right here in the Flint River. Now, I'm down here in Woodbury, Georgia. This is just one of the access points I found to see the river, actually see the water, get a lay of the land out here. This is off SR 74, again down here in Woodbury, Georgia. Now this river runs from Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, winding all the way down through middle Georgia, through South Georgia, miles upon miles of water. And I say that because that's not to say that this particular spot is where the Patans dumped and hid those bodies, but again, this is the river. It could have been anywhere along this river. But what's interesting about this particular access point is that it's about an hour and 5 minutes away from Locust Grove. Why is that important? That is where the Patans lived at the time those murders were being committed. So they would have had to drive a little bit. Norma Patton said on the stand that they drove approximately 25 miles to go dump these bodies in this Flint River. But again, down here in Woodbury, Georgia, just wanted to give you guys the lay of the land of the Flint River and where Carl and Norma Patton got rid of those bodies in the late 70s. And again, Vinny, that river runs for miles. That's not to say right there was the specific spot they dumped those 5 bodies. It could have been dumped anywhere along there. But what I did notice, Vinny, at that particular spot where there were no cameras, and I doubt there are any cameras, down a river or anything, especially in 1977, 1973, So.
Not happening back in the 70s. we barely had television. Let's talk about where they lived. They lived in Locust Grove. Where exactly is that in relation to the river?
So it's all southern, below Atlanta. It's all down south, middle South Georgia. So Norma Patton got on the stand saying that they drove 25-ish miles to dump those bodies once she helped Carl, clean them up and wrap them up in the sleeping bags. And so we put up a map just to show you where Locust Grove is in relation to the Flint River. And so, used our trusty internet to see what the closest access point from Locust Grove to the Flint River was. And Norma was right on it, 25.6 miles to remember almost 50 years ago when they dumped those bodies. So not too far away, maybe a 25-30-minute drive.
Yeah, you got dead bodies in your car. You want to get to the river. You want to get rid of the bodies. You want to get home. So
as fast as you can.
I get that. All right, Cody Thomas, thanks so much. Great reporting as always. Let's bring back in our think tank, Rick King, Ann Bremner, Matthew Mangino. I want to show you guys one more thing, which is, I think, significant in all of this, which is a map of Locust Grove to Atlanta, where Melissa's body was found. Let's take a look at that, because it's about 35 miles away. So here's Atlanta, Georgia, which is, northwest part of the state. And as we take a look at how you get from there, that's where the remains are found, that's where Cody was, to Locust Grove. Let's take a look. 35 miles, so, all in the same general area of Georgia, but not right next door. It's 35 miles. It's a decent hike here. So what are your thoughts, Matthew Mangino, as we talk about a serial killer versus a husband in this case? Those are the two suspects.
Yeah, this is really a strange case. Obviously, the murder is very gruesome. The body, she disappeared, the victim. The body was found, or parts of the body were found initially in 1999. They were misidentified. She wasn't identified until 2023. An arrest wasn't made until 2024. I think somewhere in there, there was a podcast that kind of reignited this cold case. And, the facts of this case, because of the father, because he's a serial killer, really make it, strange and interesting sort of at the same time, and also tragic because of the manner of death. But this is a tough case. The prosecutors don't have a slam dunk here by any means. You don't have a cause of death. You don't have DNA. You don't have even blood. All that you have, is a body that was found and misidentified, and then, some reignition of interest in this case, and all of a sudden you have an arrest, and now you're trying to show, based on circumstantial evidence, and that can be enough, that the husband is responsible for Melissa's death.
Rick, if I look at where Melissa was found, and relative to where the serial killer and his wife lived, didn't put if he is responsible, or he and she are responsible, didn't put the body in the river, put the body close to her home, which tells me one of two things. Either it's an attempted frame job of the husband, or, again, this is if the serial killer did it, or the murder happened in that area and the body was disposed of quickly. What are your thoughts about how, is it reasonable doubt? Is it a reasonable explanation? Because the parents at some point pushed for this case to be solved.
So it's going to come down to the really credibility argument, whether we believe the wife of a serial killer or a serial killer herself, and I self-admitted, whether we believe her testimony and as the I guess the prominent witness in this case. I agree with you that the proximity of the body parts to where they lived and to the work makes it sound like, why would someone do that and put themselves in harm's way that way? You know, it's kind of very lazy. But I don't know, who knows though.
We are out of time. Ann Bremner, Rick King, Matthew Mangino, thank you so much. When we return, I'll reveal something else you need to know tonight, plus coming up next hour.
Tonight on Vinnie Politan investigates the murder for hire of law professor and loving father of two, Dan Markell. His ex-mother-in-law, Donna Adelson, has been charged. What new evidence will we see at her trial? Tonight, we investigate.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Coming up next, only on Court TV.
Donna Adelson is facing charges of murder, the death of her former son-in-law.
Now that Donna has turned into a defendant, what's next for the Adelson clan?
The matriarch mastermind murder trial. Live coverage begins this week on Court TV.
Welcome back. Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look at the big board. Parents are the focus. This is the case of baby Emmanuel out in California. KTLA report, the parents of 7-month-old boy who claimed the child was kidnapped last week are now the focus of a missing persons investigation in which unsettling new details continue to emerge. Detectives with SBSD's Specialized Investigations Division interviewed multiple people, including Rebecca and her husband, Jake. When confronted with inconsistencies in her story, investigators said she declined to continue talking. When authorities asked her to take a lie detector test, her husband reportedly refused the request until a lawyer was present. And Fire Photo Girl on X, who's been all over this story as well, got an official statement from Jake Harrow's lawyer, Vincent Hughes. Jake Harrow is fully cooperating with law enforcement. How about that? All right, so we will continue, obviously, to stay on that case of that missing child. We have another missing child who needs your help tonight. Please take a look. This is Kiara Taubley, 16 years old, missing at a Lebanon Junction, Kentucky. If you see her, make the call, 911-1-800-THE-LOST, or you can call the Bullitt County Sheriff's Office in Kentucky. Numbers on the screen. Let's get Kiara to a safe place tonight. Don't go anywhere. We have another hour of live true crime. Vinnie Politan Investigates is next. In the meantime, please don't forget to hug the kids.